So this is the third part, or the third video, which is me providing some commentary on the interview between Maxime Lenormand, who does podcast video under the brand Minds Behind Maps, and Iain Woodhouse, who's a lecturer at University of Edinburgh, an expert in Earth observation. The interview, as I've mentioned in the previous videos, is actually on SAR. So that's radar from satellites. But I'm very interested in the latter part of the conversation, which is the focus of this and the other videos I've done, the short videos I've done. This might be actually the most important section of all of these. I'll let Iain speak first and provide a bit of commentary in a moment, but let's hear what Iain thinks about what I remember actually are typing pools back in the day, and how that kind of relates to the geospatial world. So let's hear what Iain's got to say about that.
But I remember the first time we were doing a project for ESA, and I had to produce the final report. And I said, how do I do that? Where do I type that up? And they said, no, you handwrite it and you give it to the typing pool and they will type it up. And the typing pool, certainly in those days, a group of women at typewriters who would basically type your handwritten notes into, they'd check the spelling and the grammar and they'd format it correctly. They'd send it back to you. You'd mark it up with pen in terms of changes, send it back to them. And then you'd iterate until you were happy with the final report, and then when they would put it into all the proper format and all the structure and make sure everything was right so that you could submit it to ESA. But when I joined, the lab had recently got a little piece of new technology, which was one of the first Macintosh computers. And I said, can I just type up my own report on that? Because my wife had taught me how to touch type, and I can just type up. So I just typed my own stuff up. But that is interesting if you look at the history, the transition of moving into word processing, and because it was round about that time that, well, the Macintosh computer and Windows were being developed, so that you've got Word as your first Microsoft version, which takes on some of that heavy lifting of the helping on the formatting and the spell checking and the all of these components. So all of that expertise that was in the typing pool was now being embedded into this software. And very soon after that, so many people listening will think, typing pool, never heard of it, because it very quickly died away within just a few years. And I think that we're going through that transition with Earth observation, probably GIS as well.
Let me just jump in there and take note of what Iain talks about there. He's talking about pools of experts. That's been the history of our industry, I believe. We have the GIS department in an organization who do these very specialized things over here. We've got the Earth observation, the remote sensing folks over there, very specialized groups. Take note of what Iain says there about the ending of the typing pools and how he finishes there, talking about he thinks that's going to apply to the world of geospatial as well. Let's continue with the conversation. It gets deeper than this.
Is that historically we would graduate students from Edinburgh who would then get jobs in, water authorities or local government or an engineering company. And they would be a part of a little team that would be the expert people that anything to do with maps or satellite images or anything would be done just like the typing pool. So a little collection of experts that were locally in-house that you would hand them things to say, can you do this mappy thing, please? And what's happening is that expertise is now not in-house. It's being moved to these companies that are developing these software tools, mostly software as a service through the web. And so all that expertise is now moved into the software developers, not the and away from these employing these local experts. And so at Edinburgh, we are, part of what we're doing at Edinburgh is thinking that through in terms of, well, what we should be making sure our master students are learning so they are going into that domain, including things like learning how to code in Python, is that so that they can be ready. Because the alternative is that it's actually the software developers that are getting jobs in these companies, not the Earth observation people. So they need to know how to, write code. They need to understand databases. They need to understand web-based map services and all of these things that are actually where the delivery of that Earth observation and GI work, I think we're moving to.
Okay, well, I love where the conversation is going to. Again, I'm not going to speak about what Iain's going to talk about in a moment because it's really, really a big deal, I think, as he evolves this thought process. But I think that what he's talking about there is really the movement away from experts into software. So those that have been trained at universities to be specifically doing GIS functions, analysts in particular, but a wider group as well, that's now moving into software, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And one memory I have of when I was doing my graduate degree at the University of Utah, I realized this is when the web was just emerging, so it was in the mid-90s. I said to my professor, we need to actually have folks in this department learn computer programming. We need a connection to computer science. And I was almost universally ignored within our department. And in the end, I went on my own to computer science to learn how to program. Now I notice the University of Utah has a very close connection to the computer science department. It's kind of what Ian's talking about there, about more widely training his folks, the guys that he teaches at the University of Edinburgh, to have a broader set of skills. And he'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment.
And if you look at, because Aravind and his nice graphics to do with lots of logos and things. If you look at all those logos and the software as a service, it's all as a service, on the top of these columns, and there's all these logos of companies. And it's like, these are all the companies now that are soaking up that expertise, so that the companies that are using them don't have to employ people that have that expertise. And that's a challenge for us at Edinburgh as educators, to make sure our students are going prepared into that work environment. But that's also what I see, 𝐓𝐵LOX is merely another example of that, is that the expertise is now in this company, so that the clients of 𝐓𝐵LOX don't have to employ that expertise. They have to employ somebody that maybe knows a little bit about it, but they're mostly a domain expert in something else that knows a little bit about Earth observation, rather than employing an Earth observation expert that knows a little bit about the domain expertise.
So the point that Ian's making there, and I think it's I was going to say it's a warning shot, but folks that are going into universities now and are learning how to be experts in the technology itself. Again, I'll point back at GIS myself, but it could be remote sensing, etc. That's probably not the best path one should be following, given, again, what Ian's talking about there, that the future is really about software, and the expertise being in software. We can't escape the fact that artificial intelligence is there, but broader than that. So there are now, I work on a solution very similar to that, actually, which is a SaaS product, which is really taking the software has the expertise built in. Doesn't mean experts are going away, but it means the importance of experts is lessening. It's also an indication to what universities should be using. I remember going to Weber State here and talking to them about their curriculum, and I had a very different perspective on what I could see moving forward about what they should or shouldn't be teaching. This is a few years ago, so they may have changed, so I'm not pointing at Weber State, but again, I think that what Ian's talking about here is a very big deal, and it should be something of taking careful note by those that are in geospatial at the minute, and those that are being trained up to go into geospatial. The world is changing.
It's making sure that our master's students that are doing Earth observation and geoinformation management, or our GIS students, are going deeper and understand the core basis. They're not as somebody put it, I saw recently, we're not just graduating students with driving licenses for pieces of software, right? Is that they've got to go a bit deeper than that. But the broader brush, the widening that capture, is that we can now use tools like 𝐓𝐵LOX or other tools to make sure that a whole range of other master students or undergraduate students are getting a little bit of flavor of what you can do with Earth observation, because they can jump in quickly and they can do things that are quite remarkable in terms of scale and the depth of what they can do very quickly with a very short and shallow learning curve, so that we can make sure that all these other people, the environmental lawyers or the accountants or the business school people or the carbon management or sustainable development, or all these other students that would not normally ever commit to a 10-week course to really get deep, can now get it, can get a flavor of it, and can start to find out what is possible so that they go, well, once they go out into the wide world, they go, oh yeah, Earth observation data might actually help in that.
Not just graduating students with driving licenses for software. I love that. That's fantastic. Something I've been talking about forever. And actually, I think that I used to call it, teaching button pushing. I watched it when I was doing my graduate degree, that we were just training people on how to use software, which is essentially what Ian's talking about there. So going broader and deeper is something that in universities is what University of Edinburgh are teaching, which is wonderful. But I think more importantly, it's teaching a wider group of folks that go into be specifically in areas in various domains, that these tools are available to people. So it's much more giving them the sense of what's possible. I love the way Ian finished it there by saying, they'll come out of their studies with this understanding of geospatial and the value of geospatial. And I've spoken to folks in GIS who have been desperately trying to get GIS into business schools. I don't know how they've approached it, but I suspect it's been approached probably in the wrong way. I'm not answering. I don't know the answer to the question, but we need universities to take the perspective that Ian's taking of teaching geospatial in a very different way. And I think the value of it is enormous. I mean, again, I've argued this for years in sort of talking Spatial-Next, is bringing the value of geospatial data to a much wider audience. And the way Ian's approaching it and his perspective on things, I think, is from a teaching perspective is massive. But I would say it's also a warning shot across the bows to those folks that are in the industry and are coming into the industry, that look for programs that are like that. And maybe there's never going to be a time when experts go away, but the pool of experts is disappearing, and they're going to migrate out of these very specific areas, these narrow focused areas, into a much broader, maybe into IT. I don't really know. So, we've got these two groups, the geospatial folks that maybe are going to sit in IT and have these more generalized skills, but know where geospatial fits in the bigger picture. And then we're going to have these domain experts that are learning the skills that they're learning in forestry or in engineering or whatever they are, and they're actually learning some of the geospatial tools that they can use in their own job. So again, I'll finish it by saying this is a really huge interview, part of the interview, I think, and the points Ian's making are really massive, and he's really projecting into the future. But I think that future's not too far away. I've watched for 50 years as GIS has evolved and these other industries evolved. I think we're at an inflection point, and I think kind of my interpretation of what Ian's talking about, and I'm using my own words, not Ian's, is that we're at that point where rapid change is upon us.